So going over the readings we've done in class since our last writing assignment, we're going to be looking at chapters 1 and 3 of the Introduction to Political Science textbook. So in chapter 1, what is politics and what is political science? They start out by explaining to an oblivious reader what political science is, which they define as political science investigates the reasons behind decisions the government makes. I'm going to be honest, I didn't know what political science meant until I started taking this class, so it is kind of interesting to see how, why the whole stuff we talk about is what we talk about, because it's political science. Who'd have thunk it? Not me, apparently. It goes on to talk about normative and empirical political science and the two different types of ways. Those are the two main ones that kind of is the subject of all politics that's talked about. So our normative is more questions and hypotheticals of like, what's a good citizen? Do human rights exist? If so, what are they? What is social justice? Is there an ideal constitution? Blah, blah, blah. Alternatively, there's empirical political science, which is based on not what should be, but what is. So it's very blatant, very factual. They don't have the frilly language and the hypotheticals. It's just, this is what's happening, take it or leave it. I personally think that this class is more of a normative one because we do ask a lot of hypotheticals and like philosophical questions regarding government. So that's also very interesting to learn. I want to talk about this part because I know we mentioned in class where it's like essential freedoms and rights to which all humans are entitled are human rights. It's two categories. So there's civil liberties, which is like an individual's liberties. And there's also civil rights, which is more of like a group. So civil rights is more of like, you know, like the racial movement back then with like Martin Luther King Jr., like the waves of feminism and stuff that go on. Those are considered civil rights, whereas civil liberties and individuals and me would, like, for example, and me would be like, oh, like, I don't like this government. I hate America, like, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's my civil liberty in a sense. Yeah, that's kind of it for the first chapter. Just very cut and dry, like, this is what this is what that is. For, like, dum-dums, this is what this is. And then once you move on to chapter 3, which is political ideology, they define it as consciously held ideas about how political life is structured and how it should be structured. And so when they start talking about that, they bring out our boys, Socrates and Plato. They talk about Plato's Republic, Aristotle. They talk about his Politeia. I don't know if we read that in class, and if we did, it was under a different name. But they talk about that. They talk about our boy John Locke and the social contract, and just kind of how these classical or historical texts like shaped our government and how every single government on the world can be traced back to them and the things they've said. It then goes on to talk about classical liberalism, which is funny. It says, system of thought that combines elements of natural rights, limited government, and capitalism. Yeah. Man, I just kind of thought it was funny just because, like, you always call us, like, good liberals in class, and I just thought that was funny. I just wanted to say that, but when it talks about, and it brings up my boy John Stuart Mill, and his harm principle, which has two assumptions, which are freedom encourages experimentation and open dialogue that allows people to reject and recognize dangerous ideas, and that the high value of personal liberty demands nothing less. Like, you can't have liberty if you don't have the highest degree of liberty, like, truly. And then goes on to talk about the different types of governments and like structures. So there's like nationalism, communism, totalitarianism, fascism, authoritarianism, all the isms. And then it also talks about like different kind of civil rights and like that could go against these kinds of governments. So it talks about like multiculturalism, feminism, race and gender theory, like all that good stuff. And so I said it before in my, I think, writing assignment. I don't really think they get anything right or wrong in textbooks simply because it's very like objective based stuff, very factual. They don't say like this is what we think fascism is or this is what we think classical liberalism is. It just tells you what it is and gives you examples. So kind of the same thing with getting things right and wrong. Like if it's fact based stuff, like stuff you could pull from a dictionary. You can't really get it wrong. But one of the questions I do have is on authoritarianism. It says that they may allow freedoms in non-political life, but don't permit any political challenge to the ruler. And it brings up Antonio Salazar from Portugal, Soviet-style communism, all that good stuff. My outstanding question is, like, if Putin over in Russia, if that's considered an authoritarianism, because, like, people say they don't like him over there, but he's still, what, like, prime minister, president? He's still the leader of the country, and anyone who's gone against him suspiciously dies, or just doesn't get it because it's rigged. So I was wondering if that was authoritarianism. Goodness. Moving on from that, we move on to Machiavelli. I can understand why you said he's like your favorite author. Like, he is so catty for what he did. So in his text, he starts off by saying, like, oh, if you're a prince or some kind of ruler and you want to expand your land and like conquer new nations and stuff like that, he's like, follow my playbook, like step for step, follow it, and the people who you basically colonize are gonna love you. Only for him to turn out that no, that's not the right thing. He was lying to you so he can break you from the inside out. Like, he is so catty for that. And so just some questions I have. Like, I know we kind of mentioned in class that it was like the Medicis that kind of inspired this hatred towards princes, but like, why? Like, you really didn't have to be so catty and like and sabotage them, but he did, and I can respect that for him. If I served time in prison because of a prince, I too would hate them and probably try and write their downfall. But like, my other question is also, if like Aristotle back then was like killed for like corrupting the youth, if Machiavelli was such like a profound like teacher of evil, why didn't they kill him? Or did they kill him? They might have. Some things I got right is I definitely think Machiavelli. Sorry, I'm looking this up because I actually want to know if they kill him. Oh, yeah. They didn't kill him. So why didn't they kill him if he was such a proprietor of evil? But I definitely think he got right calling out like governments and like breaking them from the inside out. Like, that's really, really bomb of him. And I was gonna also talk about like the beginnings, and he was talking about like how to be a good prince and this and that and the other, but it's all a lie. So I mean, I can't really talk about that, but I do want to talk about my guy John Stuart Mill and On Liberty. So basically what he argues in On Liberty is that governments and like society will always try and form like a mold of a person, every individual. They want to be carbon cookie cutter copies of each other, and the reason why they want this is because it makes it easier to like mold them and tell them what to do if you don't have people who argue against you or ask questions. And so he argues that in order for people to break out of this like normative society that's like super boring and all the same and like dead inside, you have to question stuff. And so I said it, I didn't say it earlier, but one of the things I wrote earlier was, he who does anything because it is the custom makes no choice. There was another one where it was like something along the lines of, humans aren't machines but trees. I can't find it now, but basically that kind of stuff. He is arguing that individual liberty is needed in order to break societal norms and like inspire a society of higher thinkers, critical thinkers, learned scholars, if you will. The great unwashed is cookie cutter bullcorn. I don't really have any questions. He was very clear and repetitive on what he was arguing in the text. I think he got all of it right, truly, like, because this is all pretty apt for like nowadays, with like our society kind of becoming mindless shells of each other because we all follow like what the internet says or like what ChatGPT says. So nice. Yes, that's what I think.